Distinguished participants, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and privilege to really address such a distinguished gathering, and I'm grateful to the Sasakawa Peace Foundation for having me as a keynote speaker today, and I hope that during our meeting today, after I make some preliminary remarks, I will open the floor for questions so that it wouldn't be just from me to you, but I would also learn the pulse here from your questions, and we can make it a two-way traffic so that we can understand some of the views on difficult issues. I think with its noble cause, the Sasakawa Peace Foundation occupies a well-deserved place at the forefront of the NGOs, and I think it strives to contribute to the welfare of the humankind and the sound development of the international community. I think SPF's mission also finds a strong resonance in Turkey, where peaceful resolution of conflicts through dialogue and cooperation has always been a primary objective of foreign policy. Perhaps I have a wonderful speech written for me to be used in this address, but after seeing this wonderful audience, I will perhaps distribute it later on and just try to talk more freely. If we look at the last 2 decades, or a little bit more, for countries like Turkey and Japan, which are prone to earthquakes, I think big earthquakes also happened in the world front, in economies, in political atmosphere, and I think as earthquakes always have following earthquakes and sometimes tsunamis, these 4 earthquakes I will share with you are still with us, and the implications, complications are also seen everywhere. I think the first earthquake I would like to share with you has been the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Soviet Empire. It was a very difficult transformation, because after the Second World War, some leaders of the winners, if I may say so, of the World War, came together in Yalta and Potsdam and had a map in front of them and decided for new territories for countries, but also decided for the future of people who are living in those territories. So, because of the decision of those leaders, some people went through a horrible communist era for 45 years, while just because of a 1 or 2 days decision, the same people from the same ethnicity had to live a more prosperous life in their 45 years period. When you look at the communist era, we're talking about people who didn't have any access to Western life, couldn't carry foreign currency, didn't have the right to travel, didn't have any right to leave their real estates behind or even have any ownership. They didn't have law universities in our understandings, or commercial universities of commerce in our way of understanding. So when the Soviet Union collapsed, these countries suddenly become either independent or freed from the Soviet system. But those people who didn't know how to live outside the Soviet or communist aquarium, well, it was very difficult for them. I mean, again, they faced a difficult situation. But I think the world faced this situation better than the other 3 earthquakes I'm going to share with you by opening the NATO possibilities and also giving European Union memberships. And this, in a way, gave some security and confidence feeling to the countries and to the people. And I think during the 10, 15 years, we can say that those countries who became NATO members and EU members are now feeling very comfortable, more than ever during the 5 decades they lived. But of course, as I have mentioned in my preliminary statement, following earthquakes and tsunamis. Now, as the Russian Federation is feeling more stronger and also trying to, in a way, compensate the losses of the Soviet Empire, has now different intentions to recuperate some of the power lost. And we're now facing the situation we are seeing in Ukraine, or we have seen in Georgia, or we will see in some other places. So this is one situation. The second earthquake was perhaps the terrorist attack to the United States. I think this was, from the experts' point of view, one of the best planned, best fulfilled terrorist attack ever. The 9/11 thing was, I think, a catastrophe for the United States, for the world, and it was, I think, it really changed all the beliefs that nothing will happen to the United States, nothing will happen to the Western world, but that particular terrorist attack, actually, one plane hit the economic system, the World Trade Center, 2 buildings, was hit to the economic system. The other hit the defense system, the Pentagon. And most probably the hit plane, the 4th one, was going to hit either the Congress or the White House. So I think this enormous terrorist attack brought us to a different era where we were afraid from terrorism. We were afraid of flying. We were afraid of walking on the streets. We were afraid of doing things we freely did previously. And I think this terrorist attack brought new security concepts, and it again caused the countries who were negatively affected or hit and lost lives to counterattack and find some solutions outside their countries. So we had an era where US troops were in Iraq, NATO was here or there in Afghanistan. Some Satans were found, like Saddam Hussein, Gaddafi, Osama bin Laden, because in the United States system, the American people are very nice people, but I think the geography knowledge of the Americans are not as much as their economic capacities. If you ask somebody in the United States, where is Turkey, they will sometimes point to Africa, sometimes to Middle East. It's very common. So it is very difficult to convince the American people to send troops abroad as well, to make them say yes for American soldiers to die for the interest of their country. Then it has to be a real reason behind it. So 9/11, in a way, was the reason, and the target, Saddam Hussein, was a reason. Getting rid of Saddam Hussein, getting rid of Gaddafi, getting rid of Osama bin Laden was a reason. So this, when these 3 figures were eliminated, now I think we entered into a situation where, United States will have a lot of difficulty to send troops abroad to convince the American people that it is necessary for the United States to interfere somewhere to save America. Nobody will say yes under the present circumstances to such kind of a demand from the US President or the Congress. So that, of course, brings us to another situation, very complex, where without the United States troops anywhere, NATO will be not as strong as it was to go into countries, make attacks, save the Western world peace, etc. So there's a complexity there. So then I come to the third earthquake, which was the economic crisis. I think it was one of the worst economic crises we ever saw. When we look at the figures after the economic crisis we had, it is almost similar to the figures we see after the Second World War. That shows how disastrous it was for especially the Western world. All the trusted structures suddenly disappearing. In 1 month, 500,000 people losing their jobs. The elements of economic development disappearing, and it affects the European countries. Some countries were caught unprepared. Normally they went bankrupt, but the system couldn't afford bankruptcy of countries, so the others came into the help of those countries, etc. But I think the effects of this third earthquake will be with us for a while, because I think some of the countries will never come back to where they were, because they were in a way built on some structures where especially in Europe, some countries have populations who doesn't like to work hard as Japanese or Turkish people. 35 hours a week is sometimes a burden for European citizens, and they wouldn't like to work even 35 hours. They get 15 salaries a year instead of 12 salaries. And with this kind of a situation, it's very difficult to come back to a welfare state without working and without really making the hard work necessary. So then I come to the fourth earthquake, which was the transformation of leaderships, political transformation in the Middle East. This was a different one because, you know, in Japan and Turkey we have a lot of earthquake experts. So normally they can say where the earthquake can take place. They will say, okay, exactly here we will have an earthquake. But I haven't seen any earthquake expert saying when the earthquake will take place. They will make some calculations. Some say it will happen in 6 months. Same place, another expert says it will happen in 5 years. Same place, another expert says it won't happen before 30 years. Another expert says, well, sometime in 500 years we will have an earthquake here. So it's the same situation what happened in the Middle East. We all knew that dictators who really had an oppressive rule in their countries were going to disappear. In Egypt, Syria, Libya, many other countries in the Middle East. But as experts for earthquakes couldn't say when, this happened, unfortunately, all together at the same time. We were expecting them to leave one day, but we weren't actually expecting them to leave altogether as a chain reaction. And this caused, of course, new situations, new understandings, new needs, And for people who weren't used to democratic life, it was, of course, a troublesome picture they entered. So this was the situation in the world for the last 2-3 decades. And I would also like to share with you what Turkey did during the 20-30 years, so that we can fit Turkey into all these developments. Turkey, from the proclamation of the Republic, had an economy which was purely state-controlled. At a later stage, we had what we call a mixed economy, where actually state was there, but the image was, because newly state enterprises were created, it was introduced as if those state-controlled enterprises were free market institutions, but for another 2-3 decades, we had a mixed economy. But practically, private sector was limited because the export-import system was based on limitation of imports. Everything was prohibited. There was a list, I mean, pages, mentioning things which couldn't be imported to Turkey, and practically everything was limited. So then we had the Prime Minister Özal period in the beginning of the 80s, and a good friend of Japan, he took a lot of examples from Japan, and he tried to free everything and just mention what is not free, just turning the shape upside down. So he issued a list of prohibited items, which was 4, 5, 10, and everything was free. This brought us to a free market economy, a liberal economy, and free entrepreneurship was suddenly introduced to the Turkish life. And when we were exporting 4 articles, cotton, nuts, figs, and tobacco, and earning $2.5 billion, suddenly we went up to 8,000 articles, and the exportation was much higher. And of course, Turkey started to examine a different life. But when you say free in front of anything, of course, that freedom and free entrepreneurship also brought some necessities for liberal free democracy. We had democracy, but liberal democracy is something much different than democracy. I worked 11 years of my previous life as a diplomat in the Turkish reform process, and somebody in 2000 said to me, when Turkey is going to have a liberal democracy? And there was a reaction from me. I said, look, we have democracy. What are you talking about? What is liberal democracy? You're creating new obstacles, new barriers by mentioning new terminology. And then he sent me, we didn't have internet at that time or Google, he sent me some references to books, and I was ashamed, seeing that there's a huge road between democracy and liberal democracy. And actually, when we started the European Union membership process, that was the part we had to fulfill. We changed 2/3 of the constitution, about more than 100 laws, changed the penal code, civil code, associations law, trade law. Almost every law was, not articles were changed, we had new laws instead. And I think because of those changes, the country is now more liberal in economy and more liberal in democracy, and freedoms and freedom of thought and demonstration and many other things have been really improved. And we're trying to become members of the European Union because of those political reforms. But what Özal couldn't do he did the economic part, changed the structures, but the democratic reforms, the political reforms, he couldn't do. And that was done during the last 10 years under this existing government's governorship. And we can now talk about a Turkey where we have a market economy and a European Union accepted political criteria adherence. During the last 10 years, when the world was facing the earthquakes I have mentioned, especially the first three earthquakes, the collapse of Soviet Union, the terrorist attacks, and the economic disaster, Turkey really did well. And because of the correct economic policies, and because we had a banking crisis in 2000, where all our banking system almost collapsed. And just to give you an example, wrong decisions, wrong political decisions affecting economy was valid in Turkey. In 1998, there were signs that some banks were going to the wrong direction. And the government at that time couldn't afford taking the risk of declaring them bankrupt. If it was the case, we could have lost 2 banks, and it would have costed Turkey $2.5 billion. But because the decision couldn't have been taken in 1998, the whole banking system collapsed. It costed us $50 billion instead of $2.5 billion. But because of sometimes from evil you get good things, what happened in 2000, Turkey restructured the whole banking system, and alarms were established. Any bank couldn't do what they did in the 1990s. And because of that measures, when the world was facing the economic crisis deriving from the banking system, Turkey had already restructured its economy and banking system so that when the world was hit, Turkey came out from the crisis even with a better economy and a better welfare. So when you look at the economic figures, in 2003, Turkey was a country of $300 billion national income-wise. Per capita income was $3,000. Our tourism revenues were about $9 to $10 billion. Our exportation was something like $50 billion. And after the crisis, if you look at the figures today, Turkey is a country $820 billion, coming up from $300 billion. It's almost tripled. Per capita income was $3,000. Now it is over $10,000 per person. The exportation was $50 billion. Now it's $150 billion. And the tourism revenues is over $30 billion. So everything was tripled. And if we had talked about these figures 10 years ago, many people would have said, well, you are lunatics. You can't do this. You are lying to us. But it has been achieved. So now we're talking about, by the 100th anniversary of the proclamation of the Republic in 2023, we will double these figures, which was tripled in 10 years, which means we are heading to $25,000 per capita income, to trillion of a national income, $500 billion of exportations, $50 billion of tourism revenues. So Turkey will be almost 5 times bigger than what it was 10 years ago. So, and this wasn't expected in Turkey or in the world. And when Turkey came to that level, it gave Turkey some responsibilities as well. When you have problems in the region we are living, and when there are people who are really suffering from the earthquakes I have mentioned, they were looking to Turkey as an example, especially after the Arab Spring or the Middle East political transformation process. They said, okay, Turkey has done it. It's a country, secular, but 99% of the population is Muslim. So if they could have done it, let us do it as well. Of course, it's difficult. It took perhaps generations in Turkey to come to that level. But we opened our hands, arms to them, not to become big brothers, but to just be an example. If they want, okay. If they want to change the constitution, okay. We have done it. We have done it this way. You can experience from that. If you don't want, you can take the German example or whichever example you want. But normally, Turkey became an example, and not only in problematic times, but also countries who didn't suffer during the Arab Spring, when they were facing a wind to make some reforms, or they will face the same difficulty some of the leaders faced, they also became our partners in a way. So this also brought some responsibilities for Turkey, not only be existent in the region, but to use the soft power, the friendship, in other parts of the world. For example, in Africa, we really made a lot of progress, and we opened many embassies there. We had only a few embassies, but the number of embassies went up to, where is it? From 10 to 27, for example. And also the African countries started opening embassies in Turkey as well. What was the result? Our trade with Africa, for example, was $9 billion when we initiated the new approach, African countries. And it is now $23 billion. So it shows that when you have embassies, when you have good relations, your intention is only to have strategic partnerships, friendships. There are benefits for both sides. The same thing happened in Latin America and Caribbean. So we had we opened 5 embassies, and it is now 12 altogether. And again, if you look at the figures, it's the same thing. In the Asia-Pacific region, same thing happened. We opened embassies in Myanmar, Sri Lanka, Brunei, and Cambodia in the last 2 years. It's just to have better relations and to really, in a way, fulfill the responsibilities put on our shoulders because of the reasons I have mentioned to you. In many cases, when there are problems around the world, Turkey is asked to mediate. Between Pakistan, Afghanistan, Turkey is mediating. Between Croatia and Bosnia-Herzegovina, Turkey is mediating. Between Bosnia and Serbia, Turkey is mediating. So really, they trust the Turkish positions, and we are doing it. And it became so successful that the UN took this mediators idea. We now have a UN sponsored or UN supported mediation club, and many countries are member to this. So this is the world and Turkey. And now perhaps let me come to the issue I am mostly supposed to talk, the Syria crisis. Why it didn't follow the same river the other countries were floating, and why are we still living with a difficult situation in Syria? I think the three countries, Egypt, Tunisia, and Libya, when they faced the spring and their leaders were changed, the elements in those events in the three countries were much different than the realities of Syria. What was different, we can mention first of all the Russian element. And this is, I think, one of the main elements why we still have the Syrian conflict with us. Russia is, because of the first earthquake, Russia wants to prove that it is a power, and wherever it finds, it uses the possibility to make people understand this power. Either it's the UN Security Council or situations like Syria or wherever. So Russia has, for 300 years, had a historical target to reach to the warm waters, as it was mentioned in the Russian strategies, even during the Tsar time. And the warm waters is Mediterranean. The first warm water is Black Sea, where they have their navy there, because all the other sea they have is in the north and ice and not usable throughout the year, and in urgent times you can't bring your fleet from northern pole to the warm waters. So during the Ottoman period, during the Tsar period, they had the wish to reach the warm waters, the Mediterranean. In Syria, now they have accomplished this wish, which was there with them for 300 years. They have a wonderful naval military base in Syria. It is well situated in the balcony. They see the Mediterranean, very close to the potential natural gas reserves, and their fleet is in the Mediterranean. Secondly, the Soviet Union was able to sell arms easily because they had control over many countries politically. Leadership was controlled. So they just sold the arms, and nobody cared whether the Russian technology is compatible with other technologies. They just had to buy. But in today's world, when Soviet Union is not there, Russia has lost a lot of political influence as well. So if you count the countries Russia has influence, it's not as much. So then they have to sell arms by entering into tenders. And then there's a competition. The US or Western technology, the Western technology is, incompatible with the Russian technology. So they aren't able to sell arms. In Syria, it's one of the countries they have possibility to sell arms. It's not just selling arms. The whole Syrian military system is based on Russian technology. Planes, missiles, tanks, battleships, anti-aircraft, everything is Russian. The military is trained under the Russian system. So they wouldn't like to lose the wonderful possibility there. And Russia doesn't have much to export either. They have natural gas, oil, and arms, a few other things. But arms exportation is an important element for Russia to continue. So when things in Russia happened, things in Syria happened, we had the Russian interests conflicting with a need to change. And the third was, of course, the political leadership. The Baath party was a creation of, in a way, the Russian ideology, and they were there. And they blocked, starting with the UN Security Council attempts, anything, any peace possibility in Syria. The second element in Syria was, of course, the Baath Party strength. If you remember, two very strong leaders, Syrian leader Hafez al-Assad and Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, when their nose were, up and they wouldn't be sympathetic to any country or any people in the world, they agreed to join the Iraqi and Syrian Baath parties, which was revolutionary, under the leadership of a Syrian Christian, Michel Eflak. So Assad and Saddam accepting to live under a Baath party, joint Baath party rule, shows how important Baath party is, more than the country interests, more than the leadership's interests. Syria, the Baath party was there, and it was controlled by the father first, and then the son came. And actually, there are two families in Syria. One is the son's mother's family, and the other is the son's father's family, which controls the whole situation in Syria. So any attempt to reform Syria, to make Syria more democratic, was taught by these two families who control, and the Baath party, thinking that it will be a danger for what they have earned economically and what they have earned politically. So they said, son, you do what your father did. That's the best thing for Syria. You shouldn't listen to what Turkey is saying, what Western world is saying, what anybody is saying, but follow your father. Continue with the Muhabbarat, no democracy, no opposition, no freedoms. We can survive like that. And he accepted that. He could have been a respected leader if he had, for example, gone to the television and said, look, Syrian people, I'm your president. I know that you want a change. I will change the constitution. I will change this prime minister. I will make some reforms. The Jordanian king did that. He went to the television. He said he will do these. Perhaps he didn't do much of these. But Jordan came out from this situation because they trusted their king. And he gave them the message the people wanted to hear from their leaders. In Syria, he couldn't do that. We tried to explain to him that, look, you're endangered. You're going to lose your leadership. Why don't you just do some reforms? Announce it. Because we had some access to the sun. With Turkey and Syria, we had difficult periods because in 1936, a part of Turkey, the Antioch, in a UN plebiscite, decided to join Turkey. And Syria never accepted this. And from 1936 onwards, they had some difficulty in Turkish-Syrian relations. And in the Syrian maps, Antioch, Hatay was never shown as a Turkish territory. Even today, when you look at a Syrian printed map, you'll see that that part is a Syrian territory, even though it was a plebiscite and UN-accepted situation. Secondly, we have two rivers coming out from Turkey, the Tigris and Euphrates, which the Euphrates passes Syria, joins Tigris in Iraq, and that's where we call the Mesopotamia. And they were afraid that Turkey one day will cut the water, and then we won't have water, our agriculture will go bad, but Turkey didn't have that intention at all. We were constructing dams, but giving water more than they even imagined, and we're still doing the same thing. So they normally played the Russian-style diplomatic game. You know, the Russians are best players of chess. They play the Russian chess game very well. They play it everywhere. in a restaurant or in diplomacy or in politics, you have the Russian chess game in front of you. And the Russians are playing the chess game in order to force you to play the Russian roulette. Normally, they want to give the pistol to you and you try your luck. So that's how the Russian mentality influenced Syria as well. And they wanted to show every card they have. We were suffering from terrorism. We lost 30,000 lives at a period where the leader of the terrorist organization lived in Damascus for 20 years. We were giving the addresses, his telephone number, and each time we met again, we were giving new addresses, new telephone numbers, but they said, he's not here, but he was there for 20 years. So when the father died, even though we lived all these difficult years, we said, let's give a chance to the new leader, because he lived in Europe. He respirated the freedoms. He knew what democracy is. So we said, he might be a person we can come out from this difficulty. And really, it worked fine. We had very good relations with Bashar, and I was ambassador, permanent representative to the European Union at that time, and European Union criticized Turkey, saying that you're a negotiating country. What are you doing with Syria? You shouldn't have good relations with Syria. But we continued, and after a while, the same people who criticized Turkey through me said, okay, you're doing fine. I think we have to reconsider our policies with Syria. But what changed the whole situation was, of course, the Arab Spring. If we didn't have the Arab Spring, Turkey and Syria would have lived a wonderful period. But when leaders lost their lives or disappeared from the scene, Assad was afraid, the family intervened, and so Syria was there. In the beginning, the Syrian crisis or the problem was much easier to solve because we had the Syrian regime fighting against the opposition forces. Now, if you look at the situation, we have Hezbollah with the regime forces. We have many elements joined the opposition forces. Nobody knows who is who there. When terrorist groups find a platform where they can continue their training, show their power, they immediately go there. They found Afghanistan once upon a time. Now they have found that Syria is a wonderful platform. So you can see their names, what they have done, how many people they killed, and it's a catastrophe. And what Bashar Assad is doing now is even a more dangerous situation because he has a B plan, which is that he almost completed the ethnic cleansing in the western part of Syria, that is the seaside, and he wants to, in a difficult situation, wants to give up the whole Syria and go to the part where ethnically cleansed. He will have a smaller but better, from his terminology, Syria for him. This is dangerous because then you will have the remaining part of Syria, which will become a platform for terrorism, for not only to attack neighboring countries, but they can use that platform as they used Afghanistan platform to hit Japan or the United States or Western world again. So this is a very dangerous station. But the good news is I think Russia is also frightened by this plan, B plan, because in this plan they might lose the naval base they already have, and the military flow of arms might be endangered, it might be limited. So now, under the existing circumstances, it looks like we might live with the Syrian crisis for some more years ahead. Why? Because the Western world, which normally had some influence in the change, for example, in Libya, now doesn't have that interest anymore. First, because there's no oil in Syria, so the oil companies wouldn't put pressure on the political decision-making system to make some moves in Syria. Secondly, because of the reasons I mentioned, the United States is not anymore ready to send troops abroad. NATO is, because of the US, is in a way handcuffed. And European Union is having its own problems. They couldn't even form the EU army, which was supposed to be formed, 60,000 soldiers. And therefore, it looks like if Russia is not convinced, if Russia is not given the guarantee that the three interests, naval base, selling of arms, and a political person Russia can live together, is maintained, and this guarantee is given, I don't think Russia-Syrian crisis will be able to be solved. So the element is to work on Russia and to find a solution in a way for the transformation. What happened, what Turkey has done is, it's our neighbor. It's more difficult when you have a neighbor in difficulty. It was, of course, an earthquake in Egypt, Tunisia, or Libya, but they weren't our neighbors. So once the problem started in Syria, we were the first country to be negatively affected. And when Assad started bombing or killing his own people, many of them started escaping from the horrible situation, and they're now in Turkey. We have about 800, 900,000. We don't call them refugees, but we consider them our guests, but it is a big burden. In the region they live, we have established camps for them. It's very costly. We spend about $2 billion up to now, and the Western world contribution is less than $100 million, which is really a growing burden. Jordan is receiving some refugees, Lebanon and Iraq as well. So this is going to be a difficult situation for all of us. So what we have done was try to bring countries together who think that there should be an end to the Syrian conflict. And Turkey started this. Many countries joined Turkey. We have a Friends of Syria group now, and among that group we have a nucleus group where 11 countries are present. They are having meetings. We are trying to support the opposition because there was no opposition. In Egypt, for example, there was an opposition. Even though there was a dictatorship, there were parties, there were internationally known figures who were present in the everyday life. In Tunisia, they immediately found people who could take over from the dictators. There was a French cultural influence. In Libya, it's a tribal system where normally the coalition of tribes found a political leadership. But in Syria, there was no opposition, no figures who can replace the existing regime. So we're trying to find people who can take over from, if there's a change, from Assad to bring Syria to a democratic and peaceful country. And unfortunately, up to now, these efforts didn't give any, any concrete results. So if I may come to the developments in Ukraine, I think Ukraine will be a difficult situation for the coming years as well, because the composure of Ukraine is if you look at the population characteristics, you will see that there is a part of Ukraine, especially in the east and in the Black Sea coast, where it is more Russian populated. And when you look at the other part of the map, you will see that there are what they call the Ukrainian populated. And it's difficult to speak in front of an ambassador who came from Kiev, but please correct me if I make mistakes. So what is the difference between a Russian Ukrainian and an Ukrainian Ukrainian? It is obvious. The Ukrainian Ukrainians are Catholic and the Russian Ukrainians are Orthodox, which makes life, some of them are. There's a wrong remark there. But it is one of the elements there. And Russia, of course, has its navy in the Black Sea, rented from Ukraine from some years ago, which is the Crimean area, Sevastopol. And this, when these incidents took place, it was a kind of a reaction from Russia to, first of all, guarantee that the Russian navy is secure. And sometimes when it's a pendulum, the pendulum goes more than the bottom point. So to guarantee the Russian navy, Crimea is now deciding to become Russian territory. And there's a difficulty in the eastern part of Ukraine as well. Some tendencies are giving similar examples, what happened in Crimea. Of course, what happened in Georgia actually gave some examples for the future. When a country who is making an attempt to challenge the Russian interests, it happened in Georgia. The Western countries, in a way, gave some messages to the, at that time, the Georgian president, who thought that whatever he will do, Europe will be with them or Western world will be with him. And unfortunately, when the Russian troops came in and divided the country into three, nobody was there. I think similar thing reminded me when things started in Kiev. I was very much afraid that the Ukrainian people who really started this process and they made their choice to be with the European Union and not with Russia, thought that at a certain stage, Europe will be with them, economically, politically, whatever. But when they thought they won the battle, they overthrew the president and President flew. Actually, the worst situation started for them. They saw that other than economic aid, nobody will be with the Ukrainian people, so they have to handle their difficulty by themselves. So now when they are facing a situation when eastern territories are threatened, some messages are coming, but nothing else is going to be with the Ukraine. It is a difficult situation because in our region, Russia is a reality, and natural gas is another reality. Russia is a big market, and many countries have companies working there, contributing to countries' economies. That is a reality. And to have bad relations with Russia is not any country would like. Country interests are more realistic than sentimental feelings. So, for example, European Union hand is tied because of Germany, for example. I mean, Germany has 8,000 companies in Russia, or many interests, and natural gas is coming there. And because of Germany, I don't think European Union can make decisions to go further than some sanctions, which are very symbolic. I mean, freezing some money of Ukrainian leaders or Soviet advisors, is not what was expected, if I may say so. And this winter, the Russian chess game will be more visible because many of the gas is passing through Ukraine, and they have promised Ukraine to give gas at a very lower price, but after these incidents they will double it or triple it or not even give it. But not giving is also will affect the other countries who are dependent on the pipelines passing through Ukraine. So it's a very delicate situation. Many countries are considering their own interests and also the world understanding that countries should have more freedoms, more democracy. Ukrainian people should have also more democracy, more liberalization. But when it comes to the implementation of these wonderful ideas, then you have to look at this realistic picture as well. So we think that what we can do is try to talk to both parties, and there are countries who have good relations with Russia. One is Turkey. We have common interests. We are getting natural gas. Our companies are investing there. And we have good relations between the President Putin and Prime Minister have established a good body language. There's electricity between them. We might have a chance to talk to the Russians. We are very good friends of the Ukrainians. We can talk to them as well. But the other countries have to do it. And unless we find a political situation based on soft power, we might face a very difficult picture in Ukraine as well. So let me stop here. I thank you for being so patient to listen to me. But I will give the floor to question askers, and so that I will be very happy to hear some criticisms, and I will try to understand what the feelings are in Japan vis-a-vis the world events, what's going on in Syria, what you think about Turkey's positions, what's going on in Ukraine. I'll be bringing back your pulse to my country. Thank you very much once again.